So these three kind of a trend over three different times. Circa 2004, the Agile, then 5-7 years ago, the cloud, and then 2 years ago, remote development. Those have just suddenly made the model that we are in now, where distributed software development teams across geography, across time zones, using cloud as a default setting, Agile as a widely accepted default way of building software. This has become mainstream now.
What happens when the rest of the world catches up to your business model? You grow because you're in a prime position. Hemant Elhence, the president of Excellerate, describes how his original company, called Synerzip, would eventually become Excellerate and a merger with Prime Technology Group, leaned into using a cooperative distributed team early on to develop software. Listen in for more about how these choices, in conjunction with cloud adoption and a changing societal mindset about remote work, have paid off for Excellerate. Enjoy the episode. IT Visionaries is brought to you by the Salesforce platform. If you love the thought leadership on this podcast, Salesforce has even more meaty IT thoughts to chew on. Take your company to the next level with in-depth research and trends right in your inbox. Subscribe to a newsletter tailored to your role at salesforce.com/newsletter. Welcome everyone to another episode of IT Visionaries. And today we got a special guest. He is the president of a company called Excellerate. It's got over 1,000 employees. Hemant Elhence, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Albert. Great to be here.
Yeah, right out the gate for our audience. Oh, by the way, audience, if you're looking at this on YouTube, you'll notice that I'm not currently wearing headphones. They broke right before the show. We got our producer extraordinaire on the other line, Hillary. She's making sure that I sound okay. Hey, Mont, hey, don't get mad at me. I'm sorry I'm not wearing the headphones. You got to keep yours on, but I have none today.
I know, it looks a little odd, but that's all right.
I'll put them on just so,
just to match up.
Yeah, they're in front of my ears, but now we can feel like we're in the same club.
I rarely wear these except for this recording.
But before we get too deep in the conversation, understanding a little bit about your business, tell our audience, what exactly is Excellerate? What do you guys do?
Yeah, good question. So, Albert, an audience, Excellerate came about as a company just about a year ago or so. We are essentially, and I'll give you a backstory in a few minutes, but we are essentially at this stage a agile product engineering services company with a deeper expertise in certain industry verticals like fintech, health tech, and insurtech. But otherwise, aside from the industry depth, we do industry agnostic agile product development work for other software companies. And we have a global delivery capability with the US, Canada, Mexico, and India. Bulk of our team is in India. That's a big part of our value prop, to provide the global talent pool, both the economics and the scale and the depth of talent that we are able to bring to our clients from our 2 development centers in India.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And for the record, so give us an idea, how many companies out there that are like massive companies? Because we know engineering. We've had multiple guests on IT Visionaries. They all talk about getting access to engineering talent is a big challenge. It's a big challenge getting enough people to work for you. So we know that a lot of these big companies, they might even be software native companies, all of their engineering is not done in-house. They might need partners to help build microservices or additional applications and features. You mentioned you have your verticals that you focus on. Are most of your customers, give us an idea, what are they looking for? Like, why do they choose to go to Excellerate? Because you guys are agile development shop. Why do they choose to go to you? Is it just because of the lack of talent? Is it because of the lack of resource? Like, why use a third-party company to help build software for you?
Yeah. Excellent question, Albert. So there are 3 primary reasons that I've noticed why clients come to us and value working with us. The first main one is most software companies who are our clients have a lot more on their product roadmap that they want to deliver to their customers, and they just don't have enough capacity in-house to do it with. They need to release big features, new capabilities next quarter, and they're completely tapped out with the in-house talent that they have. So that's the first very simple reason. We help them accelerate. That's the reason name Excellerate of the company. We help them accelerate their product roadmap of features for their customers. That's the first primary reason. Second is actually skills. Many of our clients are mid-size, often software companies, and even if they're bigger software companies, the technology is such a treadmill. They can't keep all the skills in house. Whether it's mobile development, whether it is microservices re-architecturing, whether it is cloud native design, whether it is serverless architectures. Technology is moving so quickly and so varied in so many varied forms. Any software company cannot keep up with all the technology variations that they're needing. So, as a larger company entirely focused on software, we are more likely for our clients to have a bigger platform, bigger range of skills that they don't have in house. So, we fill gaps in their skill profile. Third reason is economics. Um, if you do apples to apples comparison, we are able to provide a 50% cost advantage given the talent sitting in India working in that time zone versus the talent sitting in Dallas, Texas, or Silicon Valley, or New York City, and all that. So those are three reasons. And accelerate the roadmap of their technology priorities, fill the skill gaps that they are missing in their portfolio of skills in house, and then get a significant cost advantage. And that reason they come to us and become, most of our clients tend to be long term, ongoing partners for us, and we are doing ongoing engineering work for them.
Yeah, I mean, it makes total sense. We because we're constantly hearing about this talent, the lack of talent, or it's not that people aren't talented. It's like you said, like people have huge, ambitious roadmaps. You just can't build it
Right.
fast enough, or you can't find enough
Yeah,
people to
yeah,
build it
yeah.
fast enough.
Exactly.
What are you seeing in particular where people are really needing outside support on? Are there any categories within these verticals that you're seeing? Like, for example, are you seeing more AI ML projects? Are you seeing more UX UI projects? Like, what kind of projects are coming forward where people are like, hey, this is like where we really need to accelerate?
Yeah, very good point. So the two you just used as examples are certainly big ones. UI, UX, there's such a big focus for last few years on usability and ease of use of the front end interfaces by consumers and business users. So that is certainly a big part, and we have a big UX practice that we developed over the years. So that's certainly one. The other one, AI and machine learning, is also the only thing in AI and machine learning, what we have observed is it is a hot area, and companies have so much data that they already have. They just need to put that data to use by using AI and machine learning techniques to provide more value added capabilities to their end customers. So we are able to bring that additional expertise to take the data and make it more insights using AI and machine learning. So that's certainly the two big areas, no question about that. But then there are a lot of other areas. That the one big area that seems to be keep coming up more often is DevOps.
Mm.
And the idea is, so DevOps has become such a default and such a foundational need for every company, that they have to modernize their DevOps practices, that they can't deliver to their customer fast enough using cloud platforms and all that without sound DevOps and QA automation. They go hand in hand. These two, kind of what I would call bread and butter of complex software development, DevOps practices, and along with that, automating their tests so that they can release stuff every few hours, every few days, not once a month, not once a quarter. So these things have become almost a foundational requirement for any software company.
Okay, so this is fascinating because there was a huge movement over the last few years to move to a DevOps centric organizations where companies were saying, "Hey, we want to be able to provision, we want to be able to provision the right microservices whenever we need, no matter what services are needed to the developers on these projects as fast as possible." Um, that's always been like the goal. Prior to the DevOps revolution or evolution, if you want to say, it was like company you if you were a software engineer and you were working on a project, you would have to fill out a support ticket. You would have to go get an
Right,
instance or a database
right,
instance
right,
provision. It would take forever, right? Like it was all these
right, right,
tickets,
right,
and then someone at the other
right,
end of the ticket would be like, "I don't even know if I should provision this for you." So
right,
there
right,
was like the dream that you could just provision everything yourself, but it sounds like
right.
that's not really the case either, because that might lead to like, too many instances being set up, too much infrastructure set up. Also, there's a big problem of teardown. For anyone who's ever used, like I use the analogy of kids and cereal, right? If your kid finishes the cereal, they never throw the box away; they just put it back there. So that's what led to like a CIO saying like, "Why do I have 400 instances of database where no projects are happening on it because a developer spun it up and didn't tear it down?" So it sounds like it's heading towards this like almost like a managed service. Would you say like you're like more like a managed service where you're helping with the DevOps, and that's why they're like saying, "Hey, Accelerate, you handle our provisioning, you tear your teardowns, you handle all our microservice access. We want to move fast, but we also know our own internal people won't, I guess, take care of it enough." I don't know. Why do you think that you see that growth happening in for Accelerate?
Yeah, you touched a very important hot button about provisioning and over provisioning and wasting some of the compute and storage resources and running a bill. And I was just with a client this last week, and they were telling me the horror stories how they find out, at the end of the month, additional $30,000 or $50,000 just because someone left certain machines open or certain servers they spun up, but they didn't turn them down. So that's I think, but I think, Albert, I think that's a different challenge, adjacent but different challenge than the DevOps. So DevOps that we were just talking is essentially modernizing the tooling in a way that the developer can do their part of the coding and press a button, and it can go, the functionality can be released easily into a staging environment without the developer having to monkey with anything. That's DevOps tooling, just putting the machinery, basic, what is called continuous integration machinery in place, so the tests run automatically, the build happens automatically, all those things. So a developer can focus on their value-added coding part. So that's a DevOps. So DevOps is now a table stakes. Every good modern software company needs to have DevOps tooling in place. But the point you made about provisioning cloud and not making sure you're not wasting cloud resources and running access additional dollar bill and eating into your budget, I think that's a new area that a lot of companies, even the bigger ones, have just started worrying about. Because see, cloud companies, the Azures and the AWSs are very smart. They know how to get you in the door, and they know, they have very astute pricing policies.
Oh yeah, they won't even leave it on. Leave your Skunkworks project on forever, baby.
Yeah, exactly. The meter keeps running. So that aha of how to optimize your cloud resources while you're managing them to do what you need to do, but then turning the lights off when you leave the room is very important. Not many companies have yet attended to that hygiene yet.
Oh yeah, we hear of, you mentioned the automations. I can see companies automating, the spin up. They always automate the spin up. Right. They've not figured out how to automate the teardown.
Right. You're right. So I think there's a room for improvement there, and of course the cloud vendors have no particular incentive to do that, as they will say it. So I'm hearing already from our clients that this is becoming a real challenge because developers are just spinning up stuff, doing their R&D work and proving something out, but then leaving the lights on, and then at the end of the month, then you see the bill.
So for yourself, I'd love to understand a little bit about the business, how, and especially yourself, how did you get into this line of work? Did it start off as, hey, I'm just going to help a couple developers build some projects, because you've been at it for quite a while? I'd love to understand how you decided to build the business up to what was originally, let me make sure I get the name correctly. The name of the company was, well, you can fill me in. What was the name of the company again?
So the original company that I co-founded was called Synerzip, SYNERZIP, in September 2004.
Exactly.
And this, the way we started that company was to help venture-backed, high-growth software companies rapidly scale their engineering roadmaps, the kind of things I said. And then 16 years or so into it, so December 2020, we merged with another company called Prime Technology Group out of Wayne, Pennsylvania, and that company was a little older than us in their vintage, and they had developed over the years expertise in certain industry verticals that I talked about: health tech, fintech, and insurtech. So we combined the two companies together. So Synerzip side of the house brought the industry agnostic agile product engineering capability. Prime Technology Group brought in the industry expertise of health tech, insurtech, and fintech, and the two together made for a much better combination that we can offer the both industry and agile product engineering capabilities to our target market. And not only that, do that with a global talent pool with two big development centers in India, in Hyderabad and Pune, and then additional development centers in Canada, US, and Mexico. So we cover near shore, onshore, and offshore, all three time zones, all three economics. Each of these regions have different economics and time zone convenience trade-offs.
Yeah. And what I want to do is take our audience back to that moment when you decided, hey, I'm going to go from being, a COO of a company to I'm going to start my own agile development shop. Were you already getting the itch? Like you were saying, hey, I want to do something different. Talk about how you just made the decision to say, okay, I'm going to break away and do my own thing.
Yeah, so I think the short version of that story, Albert, is that we were raising capital for where I was CEO in the previous company with venture capital firms, and we realized the venture capital firm. This is circa 2003 2004 timeframe. The venture capital companies that we were talking to at that time, they were having such a challenge of helping their portfolio companies scale their engineering team in a capital and cost efficient manner. So they would ask us, because in our previous company we had a development center in India, so they will ask us if we would be willing to do some kind of moonlight services work for their portfolio companies, because we happen to have a development center. And that's where the light bulb went into our heads, founders, that we thought, look, there is actually a pretty good white space for us to create a pure services firm and help these venture capital and private equity portfolio companies scale their engineering team with a cost and capital efficient way of tapping the talent in India, while preserving the intellectual property and the quality of work they need to get delivered with a US based interface.
And then, for yourself, like how did it first look when you first started getting into this game? Because, I think back to you've had a front seat. You've had a front seat really to how fast software development has evolved over the last, you just mentioned 2004, but you've been in the software game earlier than that. What have
Right,
you
of
seen
course.
really change? Because even back then, you mentioned it, venture backed companies were trying to accelerate their roadmaps, and they couldn't do it always with just their own talent. They had to outsource some of the talent. So you
Right,
saw that right
right,
from the beginning, right?
right.
Give us an idea of how things have changed in software development and engineering, and what the CTOs, I guess it's primarily the CTO you work with. Is that right? Is that right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. CTOs are our main target clients. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And what is like, how have things changed in this last, couple decades? Like where are the
yeah,
demands? Where are the constraints? Because it sounds like resource has always been a challenge. That's why you exist. But give
yeah,
us an
yeah,
idea, like when it comes to
yeah, yeah,
development
yeah.
techniques, ideas,
Right,
what
right.
have you seen change the most?
Yeah. So I'll tell you the three things that come to mind right away. Three. The first one, which came early on in the right around the time when we started the company and we latched on to that trend, is agile. The agile approach to software development, which was new, circa 2004, when we started Synergip, the predecessor company of to Excellerate. Agile was a new idea, and it was defined. The whole essence of Agile was to do co-located teams. You had to be sitting next to each other using
Hmm.
whiteboards to do your tracking of your Scrum burn up charts and all that. So it was all co-located. Agile was defined as a highly collaborative way to build good software, but with co-located teams. And what we did was we reinterpreted Agile to apply to distributed teams, people sitting, in India versus in US, and collaborating across time zones with our clients in US and all that. And that actually worked out beautifully, because you could build trust across the time zone, across the geography, because Agile provided a tight cycle of feedback loop, that you could do something today, demo it tomorrow to your client say, this looks good, but I need to change this box from left to right and all that. And before you know, the two teams are collaborating and trusting each other through that feedback loop of demos. So Agile was the first big trend that we embraced wholeheartedly, even though it was not meant for distributed teams at that time, 2004 timeframe, but it worked out beautifully. So that was wonderful. So that happened and helped us in our growth and all that through those decades of. The second thing that happened maybe about maybe 5, 7 years ago was cloud. That now that the development cloud became a default platform for not only development but delivery also, meaning a team sitting in India or a team sitting in Austin, Texas, both teams were accessing their code base, their source code over the cloud, GitHub over the cloud. So it didn't matter that you were time zones away and all that. So it just made distributed development a lot easier with cloud becoming the default. In terms of security, in terms of access, you could be sitting anywhere so long as you had good internet access. So that became a big push to make it easy for our clients to work with us. Third thing that just happened 2 years ago is COVID, right? So what happened starting March of 2020, people quickly realized you have to be working from home. So it doesn't matter if you're in Austin and you have a nice high-rise office space and you want all your developers to come there. Nobody was coming into office anyways. So it didn't matter that your developers are working from home in Austin versus their home in Pune, India. So that remote development suddenly became so accepted and even preferred. People were more productive. They didn't mind the fact that they needed to get on a call at 10 p.m. their time, because after dinner they could get on a call. So the time zone issues start evaporating with working from home, acceptance. So these three kind of a trend over three different time. So circa 2004, the agile, then 5, 7 years ago, the cloud, and then 2 years ago, remote development. Those have just suddenly made the model that we are in now, where distributed software development teams across geography, across time zones, using cloud as a default setting, agile as a widely accepted default way of building software. This has become mainstream now. So our value prop has become suddenly very much. I used to make an effort in the early years to convince my CTOs why it would work well to have a team sitting in India, 10.5 hour time zones behind the US Central Time and all that. Now that discussion is not even needed.
Absolutely.
Never comes
Like
up.
the evolution. I mean, because I always date myself on this show because I haven't been part of a true software company for a while now. But in 2011, when we were building up the software company that we eventually sold called Expion, outsourcing was not an option. Like our team
Yeah.
was like, it's not an option, even though we were already using cloud services. At the time, our CTO probably didn't really understand or have confidence in building a remote team. You mentioned a lot of factors, both in technological development. So process development, that's agile, technological development, cloud, and then I guess remote working is just an attitude change, right? People are
Yeah.
just like,
Yeah. It
oh,
is a
well,
big, exactly.
this is
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like
Yeah.
it makes it a lot easier. So would you say like there's more companies now attempting to figure out ways to partner versus like hire? Because like of course, every day, if you look at the news closely enough, there is a software company that will have to shutter its doors or do layoffs because the talent is expensive, and if they're not developing fast enough and they're not hitting revenue milestones, of course, you have to roll back some payroll. Are you seeing an even more increased demand to use
Absolutely.
services like
Absolutely.
yours?
Absolutely. So the two models that have become way more common now, Albert, now that we are in this circa 2022, one is every company feels that it is completely okay, even accepted or expected, that I don't need to have all my software talent in house. It
Yeah.
is good to have. I need a 40% team for my R&D roadmap. I just need 10 as my employees. Remaining 30, 40, I can use partners like Excellerate. That's a preferred model. So that has become very much a expected model, that I don't need to have all 40 people on my payroll. So that's one thing. Very much the mainstream now. The second thing is, even the companies who have their own development centers in India, in this example, because we have large, they're coming to us now and they say, look, we have a big development center in Bangalore, but we are not able to hire certain skill profile, let's say DevOps or UX design or AI, machine learning, the things we were talking. Can you help us? Because you as Excellerate have a much more well-oiled recruiting machine, because this is what we do for a living. We are a services business. That's what we do. We have a highly fine-tuned recruiting machine to attract really good talent and do that in a very efficient way. So even the companies who have their own development centers in India are now coming to us, and we become their additional development capacity for them in addition to what they have in Bangalore or Pune or Hyderabad themselves.
Yeah. And for you yourself, your company, you work in an interesting sector. You mentioned before that your company, Accelerate, focuses health tech, fintech, insurtech. And, when you say those things, I just think to myself, that's highly regulated, highly regulated, highly regulated, also
Right, right.
highly susceptible to cyber attack. The reality is those industries carry a lot of data that people find extremely valuable. Talk about what does that mean to be in that, to serve that sector specifically? Does it mean like you have to, because on one hand, this is what I think, right? On one hand, the needs of the business don't change. They all want to move faster. There's no CEO out there that's like, we should move slower. They all want to move faster, ship more products, ship
Right,
better services.
right.
That's going to happen. But on the other hand, you have a security requirement because it's highly regulated and it's a target. The reality is you're serving customers that are targets.
Yeah.
How does that play out, and what are you seeing in those highly regulated industries when it comes to third party software development?
Right, right. So the two answers to that. First answer is our clients tend to be software companies who, so they're building a health tech software, or they're building a fintech software, or they're building a insurtech software.
Gotcha.
So data is less of a challenge. The users, their users are insurance companies, their users are financial services companies, their users are healthcare providers or payers. So the data issue is less of a concern with them. We're building software functionality, and we're using test data to test the functionality, but it's test data which is not very sensitive. So we don't end up finding ourselves squarely on the data issue, data security issue in general. In general.
Gotcha.
Now, having said that, there are few of our clients who are, we are doing the IT departments of a, let's say, a insurance company and all that. So once in a while, we do find ourselves, but on the data topic. But most of the time, the cloud has been very helpful because they're putting, let's say, an AWS instance in Singapore or somewhere else. The data is all in the cloud, whether they're the companies in US or companies in India. Data is highly secured by the guidelines and the robustness of cloud vendors, AWS and Azure's. So we don't end up needing to worry too much about that level.
No, well, I mean, I guess that's fortunate.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that's almost a non-issue these days. These topics. Yeah.
That's awesome. That is good stuff. When I think about software development specifically, I always think to myself, how much better can our lives get? Because it's hard to conceptualize. When I see new apps, because I think we're all falling victim to it now, because there's so many apps and so the software has changed so much in the last few years. How much faster and smoother can products become? What else do you think? What do you see unlocking in the horizon? Because when we think about the modern, because like I joked with this with people that are outside of the tech industry. A lot of people, for example, will outside of tech will think that, let's say they're using whatever they're a company that's maybe not in tech primarily, like let's say education, or they might be in childcare, and they say to themselves, "Hey, well, if I launch this app, I'm going to get more business." And I'm like, I don't think so, because people aren't like apps don't have that like same you know what I mean? Apps and
Yeah,
software,
yeah.
they don't have that same like people used to think like, oh, if I launch an app, people will just flock to it. It's like that's not true. Like
Right,
people,
right.
people, people like the service the app provides, but they're not going to
Yeah,
flock to
yeah.
you because you have an app. I read somewhere like,
Right.
every day Apple approves 1,000 apps a day, which is
Wow. Big number.
bonkers.
Yeah,
So when you
yeah,
think
yeah.
about software and how these industries are, software is changing these industries, what are some new developments you think that you can see on the horizon? You're like, wow, this is going to have a big change for people, or is it going to be more subtle? I always think to myself, like, as software gets better, it's almost going to become passive, meaning like I don't have to do anything; it's just going to do things for me. And when those things come true, that's when I'll be super happy. I always joke with like calorie counting as my favorite example. If anyone's ever used a calorie counting app, it sucks. Like you're adding in like how many cups of blueberries you eat, and it's
Right,
calculating.
right.
It's like preposterous. I want to be able to take a picture of something and it tell me how many calories are in it. I don't want to add anything. And I think that's how people are getting,
Right,
is they want to put no inputs. They almost want the software to be preemptive and like do something for me.
right. No, no, you're right. You're right. So I don't know. I don't have a good answer to that. I mean, but it's a constant evolution, like you touched on, which is happening, making software functionality for consumers easier to use and more automatic. They don't have to do stuff. Just take a picture, like you're saying,
Yeah.
of a bowl of blueberries, and it will estimate how many calories in there, and it's close enough, right? I mean, you don't have to do a lot of legwork. So I think that's a good example, and there are many others like that. That I find that so it's gradual improvement constantly. So what keeps happening in this industry, as you know, is the compute power with newer and newer chips keeps getting better and better. Storage keeps getting cheaper and cheaper. So the functionality in the form delivered using high powered mechanisms like AI and machine learning and imaging and computer vision and all that keeps consuming this additional horsepower of the CPU and the storage capacity that is becoming cheaper and cheaper. And the beneficiary are us consumers, whose life gets easier and easier. We have less manual stuff to worry about, more automatic stuff happens. And now, just like steps. I mean, you walk around, iPhone counts your steps. You don't have to do anything. So so I think that's just that trend will continue, and thanks to Intel's and in AMD, the ARM compute power will continue to get better, and we'll continue to enjoy better utility.
Yeah, listen, I can't wait. I'm still waiting for that one AI though to organize my schedule, because right now I'm still organizing my schedule. I think when someone figures out a way to optimize my schedule, then I will be truly, truly
You're
in
right. You're right.
compute
You're right.
bliss.
You're right.
Everyone's trying
So,
to
so
figure that
good thing
out.
is, so there's a lot of room for continued innovation, like
Absolutely.
scheduling optimization. Yeah.
Amon, it was awesome having you on the show. Thank you for sharing your journey. Thank you for sharing your journey from agile, the
Absolutely.
three big benchmarks, right? Agile, cloud, and just general remote acceptance. I mean, it
Yeah.
could totally transform the way offshoring or having a third party software development team. I can see how that's completely changed its attitude. You know,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
but before you go, it is time for the lightning round. The lightning round is brought to us by Salesforce Platform, the number one cloud platform for digital transformation of every experience. Amon, this is where we ask you questions outside of the world of work so that
Okay.
our audience can get to know you a little better. You ready?
Sure. Okay.
All right. From our research, it looks like you really enjoy reading. Is that accurate?
Yeah. I mean, I love to buy more books, and I read a few. Let me put it this way.
You sound like my wife, man. She buys a lot of books. I don't know how much she's reading, but she buys a lot of them. I know
Exactly.
that.
Exactly. But I do read. I do read. Yeah.
You recently put out a post of like your top 10 books or ideas.
Yeah. Yeah. I did.
You named, I'll name a couple. The Goal by
Yeah.
Eli Goldratt. If I mispronounce any author's name, I'm sorry. Crossing the Chasm by Jeffrey Moore. The Seven Habits by Stephen Covey. How did you put out your own top 10 list. What does it mean to be in your top 10 list? Why did you choose the books you chose?
Excellent question. So this, I think I felt a need to somehow I felt a need towards the end of the year. The last month of December every year. You got time, you got a little bit of downtime. The schedule is open. You got to think about stuff. So I think I was in that mode. I think this was pretty much the last week of December. I think when I listed that. So that way I defined my top 10 was things that have influenced my thinking in a day-to-day basis. So when I talk to a client today or talk to any business problem today, what has influenced my frame of reference and how I make decisions, how I solve problems, how I deal with stuff. So which books and topics have really guided and significantly pivoted my thought process. So that book, the list that you just saw and mentioned some of them. So for example, Goal. So Goal is a book I read first time in my MBA class circa 1991 in Chicago, right? And it is such a wonderful, what I should say, parable about the system and how to look for if you want to improve the throughput of a system, you should focus on the constraint, the bottleneck in the system, right? Don't spend an ounce of energy on any other part other than the bottleneck. And that, in hindsight, is so obvious that, yeah, I mean, if you have a pipe and there's a narrower bottleneck in it, that's the constraining kind of a step in it. That's where you should focus if you want to improve the throughput through the pipe. So that's just one example of a very foundational idea. Similarly, the crossing the chasm, the adoption curve of technology by Jeffrey Moore has been such a foundational idea. So that's what my list, if you say everything in book in that list, is actually things that have such a foundational impact on how I think about stuff when I'm solving real world problems with clients and people and business and all that. So that's how it make it to those are the things that made it to the list.
Now, do you ever read anything fictional?
I never do. That's a good point. I just the fiction just does not engage me.
Hey,
I want
you're
real
like me,
world
man.
stuff.
I don't read any fiction either. I don't know why it is. I just like, hey, this story is
I just don't
fake.
find it interesting.
I always say
There's
that.
so much
like,
interesting stuff in real world, you know?
Exactly. I love. There's so many interesting things happening, and like people are like, why don't you like this? Like, well, it's fake. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like Harry Potter, he's a wizard. Like I guess it's interesting. I don't know. What do you like to do for fun?
So fun. I think lately, I know a lot of people have picked up, and I was dabbling in it. One of the recent things is, of course, backyard gardening. I've been fascinated by this idea of seed germination. My son will tell you. So I've been fascinated about actually any good fruit or vegetable I find, I figure out a way to germinate the seed and nurture that plant to grow. And of course, that's one example of gardening that I've been more fascinated about than others. But just the whole idea of nature and seeing the seed germinate, and only a fraction of the seeds that you plant actually germinate, and only a smaller fraction become any viable size over time. And then the frost happens in Texas, they all die anyways after that. So, but gardening has been an interesting new topic that I have kind of been dabbling lately.
Listen, I'm fascinated by gardening too. By the way, my friend put me onto this, and he says what you want to really find out is like low care gardening, which
Low care, huh?
basically, but yeah, this is what I'm not sure if I have the right term, but they were saying like, because I was trying to grow things that like kind of like what you described, that took a little bit of effort and attention.
Yeah.
He said what you should do is just take a whole bunch of plants and just drop them in the dirt and then see what grows, because whatever grows is what is resilient to the climate and the soil composition and the water, all that stuff. And so I'll tell you for myself, I found out that squash grows like a weed for me in my yard. If you throw a squash plant outside, it's gonna grow. So I told my kids if there's a nuclear fallout, they're gonna eat squash only. Because I don't know how to hunt. I don't know how to hunt or fish.
Yeah. That's a good thought process. Let the local climate and the soil type make the decision what will grow.
That's right. So like, and it's I'm like you. Like when I go traveling, I always look at what do I see a lot of, just endless abundance of, and like I can tell anyone who likes mangoes, go visit Costa Rica. The amount of mangoes on the ground, it's insane. I'm telling you, like the monkeys, they take one bite. If it's not sweet enough, they just throw it on the ground.
Yeah, that's luxury. You're right.
Well, Hemant, it was awesome having you on the show. Thanks for sharing your philosophy on software development. Thank you for sharing your career and how you've seen software and agile change, especially the attitudes towards third-party developers, outsourcing. I think you are correct. You will only get busier. You will only get busier because the demand for products is not going to change.
You're right. You're absolutely right. Great to be on this show with you, Albert, and look forward to seeing rest of your guests. I've been listening to some of your other guests. It's a wonderful channel you got going.
Well, I appreciate that. We'll have to throw a special shout out to our sponsors at Salesforce platform.
Good. Sounds good. Well, thank you for having me on.
Awesome.